Hey everyone, welcome back to Doodle Therapy. It's great to see you all again. How is everyone doing? It's awesome to be back with day 2 of Doodle Therapy. We just wrapped up a really full day of super interesting and fun drawing sessions and design sessions here on Adobe Live. So pumped to be kind of wrapping up the day with you guys here. I know that there's a lot of people for whom this is afternoon, but I'd love to know, where everyone is tuning in from. So let me know in the chat and we can get kind of a roll call going. I see Mary and Michelle and Anna here. Hi, Monir. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I'm based in the Bay Area, but would love to see, where everyone is coming in from. So I see Corey's based in Dallas. Sung-hee is in Richmond. Hey Nancy, yay, favorite time of the day. It is also one of my favorite times of the day too. For those who are new to Doodle Therapy, this is just a time for us to just chill, relax, come together with friends in the creative community and just draw and express ourselves through our doodles and conversations that we're gonna have in the chat. Hi to Chris from Des Moines, Iowa. Laura, hi to Aunt Christine. Vanessa from LA, Clever, Steven from Brooklyn, hi Karan from India, Anna from Argentina. Wow, so we've got a lot of people from lots of different places in the world. So whether or not this is afternoon for you or morning or evening, welcome back to Doodle Therapy, and grab a cup of tea or your preferred beverage. I've got water here. And let's have a nice hour of just doodling and drawing. Howdy to Mike from Nashville, Tennessee, and to John in Tokyo. Thanks for submitting, John. Saw your submission on Instagram. And to Christina from Fremont. So, a little bit about me. I'm Alice, I'm your host. I'm a San Francisco-based illustrator and muralist. I'll pop up some of my past works on the screen here. You may have seen some of my works around in places like these, most recently at the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, Phil's Coffee, Coach, and I've also painted for a lot of tech companies like Slack and Dropbox. And hi to Safan from Saudi Arabia. And for Monir, it's tomorrow, so it's midnight. So thanks for staying up late and drawing with us. So you might be wondering, what is Doodle Therapy if you're new to this stream? And basically, this is a weekly drawing show where our goal is to just come together and have a space where we can doodle and not feel too attached to the results. Our goal is just to draw and just let our thoughts and feelings out through the work that we're going to be making. And because this is an interactive drawing show, the way it works is every week there's a different doodle prompt. This week, for example, we are working on painting landscapes. So along with the theme, there's also going to be a weekly doodle challenge. And today I'm going to just pull up a few of the doodle submissions that will be winning our stickers giveaway. But essentially, because this is an interactive stream, all doodlers from, all different skill levels and ages are totally welcome. Our goal is just to have like a chill time and doodle together. And if you're wondering, the music that is in the background is Lullitone, which is one of my favorite bands to paint to. I've finished a lot of these projects and murals while listening to some of their music on repeat. And it's just this really like melodious, soothing, and just like delightful sound. So we're gonna be listening to Lullitone while also painting. So let's just jump into it. So before, we cover the submissions for the doodle prompt, I just wanted to start with this quote that I saw and I was really inspired by. And it's by the author Maxine Hong Kingston. It goes, "In a time of destruction, create something." The context for this quote was actually, it's from a poem that she wrote, and I believe the poem was written about just like living in a wartime situation. And it's just about like in a time where it seems like externally there's so much going on that is out of our control, that is always changing, and might be overwhelming. And it seems like, a lot of our typical day-to-day routines are being pulled apart a little bit. It's also a time that we can reflect, and, the parts that we can control are in our lives. So we can come together and create something. And it could be as simple as a moment of peace together, or a doodle, or a kind gesture to a friend. So that is the quote that I just want to start this hour off with, and would really encourage you to just keep in the back of your mind. We are in a really weird time, but if you feel like it, it's also kind of beautiful, I think, to try to create something right now. And so to answer Mary's question about if this is an Adobe font, this is just my handwriting. I tried to write it as neatly as possible, but you can see, like, I'm just scribbling. So so like I mentioned, the theme for this week's doodle session is painting landscapes. And what I really like about painting landscapes is, you can totally go all in and just render, these crazy details, kind of like some of the pieces in the mood board here, but also you can really go towards the simplified direction. And so our weekly doodle prompt was to create these abstract color studies, aka color blocks. And the goal here was just to use a really limited palette, so 4 or 5 different colors, and just, start to create shapes that feel right to you, or just, put on your favorite music or listen to the lullaby tone in the background and just draw like the shapes that feel the most pleasing to you. And so my prompt, or my invitation to the viewers yesterday, was to create their own color studies. You can use photographs for reference, or inspiring pieces of art from your mood board. So for example, I've got some Studio Ghibli films here, Makoto Shinkai films, simple photographs of sunsets, and some really cool stylized photographs from Pinterest. And I noticed that the theme amongst all of them was clouds. So I ended up, I feel, painting a lot of just very abstract, wavy clouds. So with this week's giveaway, I received a bunch of submissions, so thank you to everyone who submitted. And I randomly chose 3 winners to win a custom sticker pack of stickers that I designed. And it might be a little hard to see, but it's basically a cat that's holding a heart, and it said, "Believe in yourself." So the winners that I'll be showing and reviewing their color studies in a bit, they'll be receiving a message from me about their mailing address, and then they'll be receiving a sticker pack. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. So this first color study was from Vanessa. It was submitted on the Discord, and it looks like they were using the sunset photograph and took that as a starting point for their simple color blocks. And I really like just using simple photographs that I've taken. Sometimes I'll just pull up my camera roll and I'll just take, my favorite photos from the past week and just kind of use that as a reference point for interesting palettes or shapes. And so it looks like Vanessa pulled this like bright orange from the sun and then kind of worked the composition around it. I really love that pop of color. And then there's maybe more of like a daytime scene here. So props to Vanessa. You are going to be receiving a sticker pack in the mail. This next one is from Made by Panini. They submitted it on Instagram. So it looks like Made by Panini used also a photograph as a reference and just extracted a bunch of colors to a simple palette. And then from there drew this really abstract, almost like foggy color blocking study. And I am a really big fan of this like pop of magenta, which is clearly from the flowers. So great job. And then they further developed it and then created like a scene out of it. So great job to made by Panini. It's a really great example of how you can use a simple color study as a starting off point and use that as like research that you've done into creating the colors and the composition of a more fleshed out piece. And then the final submission winner for the random giveaway is from ivave.draw, also submitted on Instagram. And so I really like how peaceful this composition is. I think they mentioned it almost looks like Mission Peak, which is a mountain in the Bay Area that I have hiked with my dad too. So, and I also like, it looks like they threw on a texture layer on top of this. So that's kind of cool. It looks almost like you painted it on parchment. So congrats to all 3 winners. And thanks to everyone who submitted. If you weren't randomly selected, I'm sorry about that, but feel free to check back in. And also I know that, Adobe has like creative challenges going on every day, so there's plenty of chances to enter giveaways. So yeah, and congrats to the three winners. If you're tuning in today or watching after the stream is aired live, I still totally invite you to participate and join along in this very like de-stressing exercise of creating abstract color studies. It's really fun. All you have to do is just start from, you could just start from like a simple mood board. You can assemble the visual inspirations that you love and then just go from there and throw on your favorite music and just like doodle away. Yeah, so thanks everyone for submitting. Anna says beautiful colors. Joanna says all the entries were fantastic, and I totally agree. Yeah, I'm seeing some questions actually in the chat about which tablet I use. So I'm using a Wacom Cintiq. It's a 22 HD. It's like a monitor size. And then sometimes I also use an iPad if I'm like on the go. But when I'm at my desk and streaming, I prefer the bigger ones. But I'd love to know like if anyone else has the similar setup or a different setup. Just curious, like how is everyone making art? Cool. So like I was showing you guys yesterday, you can use these simple color studies as a jumping off point to then jump into a more complex piece, or almost like a sketch, right, for your final piece. So I selected this color study over here, and then I actually brought it over to my screen here. And I think if you're curious about how I went from this color block, which I'll put in the corner, to some of the decisions that I made in rendering this piece, totally encourage you to watch part 1. And if you also have any questions in the chat, feel free to ask in the Behance chat. But basically what I'm doing is just taking the colors that I've already started to outline here and the shapes and the general composition, and then translate it into a scene that feels interesting to me. Hi to Miguel for joining. Yeah. So, I'd love to know if anyone is, working on anything similar. Are you painting landscapes? Are you doodling along with doing the color studies, or considering, creating a fleshed out version of the color studies that we did yesterday? Just let me know. And I am just going to dive into this, guys. So one thing that I like to do when I'm working on a piece and it's getting kind of complicated is I will create like a sketchy version of what I want to draw, and then I will color code it. So for example, I really want to flesh out these clouds, but obviously this is kind of like a sketch version, right? It's not the same level of detail that I want. So I just drew them in so I could see how they feel compositionally, and then I just color coded it as orange, and then that way I know that it's a sketch for me to return to in future reference. And then some of the submissions actually started doing this yesterday, but what you can also start to do is consider how you might add a character in. So I wanted to draw this girl character who is interacting with the scene in some way. Usually, this is a little backwards. Like usually I'll start with the character and then fill in the scene, but for the purposes of this exercise, just started with the background first. So, there might be a few issues with like the composition not really matching up or the colors, but my goal is just to like figure out what the story is first. So hi to Ken who just joined. And yeah, thanks to Jeffrey for dropping in the music. It's by Lullitone, which is an awesome band. They're based in Japan, and it's some of my favorite painting music. Mary says they're mostly just working on their Photoshop skills along with me and drawing. Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that this can help. And also, if you ever find yourself without your computer, you can totally just do this with like crayons or markers or just whatever drawing utensils that you have around. So yeah, I first just started drawing this girl, and I was thinking like maybe the story is that she's drawing on an artboard in the middle of this like very surreal landscape. I'm not too sure. Again, like I said, I'll normally start with the character and then flesh out the scene, not the opposite way around. But the goal with Doodle Therapy, and I think this exercise, is to make work that feels like it's just flowing and feels like it's just exciting and natural to draw. So I don't want to like overthink it too much. I just want to just go with whatever feels interesting to me right now. Cool, so I'm just gonna flesh out some of these details a little bit. And so like I mentioned, I have on the right side, you can see in my layers panel, I've marked these guys as orange because they are totally work in progress and they don't necessarily really fit yet, but that's okay, because we're not trying to get it to be perfect from the get-go. So last week, our prompt that we did was everyone shared and doodled a moment of joy that they experienced in the last week, like a highlight from your last week. So I would love to post to the chat and ask you guys, what is a highlight, big or small, that happened in your last week? And it can be something like you cooked a really delicious new meal, or you started watching like a really interesting television show, or even a bigger accomplishment. For me, I would say we baked these really good pear and oatmeal cookies yesterday, and I'm very proud of them. And now I know that I have the ability to make cookies whenever I want, so it's also dangerous. Wow, congrats to Mary for graduating from graphic design school. That's awesome. I also remember someone else graduated from college recently in the last week's chat as well. Oh, cool. Congrats. Happy birthday to Stella, your husband. Quarantine birthdays are, I think quarantine birthdays can actually be really special because it's like everyone is like choosing to attend and like trying to come together even when it's hard. So yeah. Jack redid their website. Congrats. That's a major accomplishment. I am someone who I'll update my website like once every year, if that. I think it's been a year and a half since I've updated my website. So yeah, what did you, like how did you make your website? Are you using like a portfolio platform like Behance, or are you coding it by hand? Like what is your website on? And curious about everyone else, like what is your personal website practice? Do you guys like update it frequently? Is it like a once a year thing like me, or a never thing also like me? Oh, congrats to Catherine for making a set of GIF stickers. Catherine, you should totally link to those stickers in the chat. I think people would love to see. And also, Catherine is a really talented artist, so you should check out her work. Oh, congrats to Chris for releasing a book. That's a huge accomplishment. Chris, you should also link to the book. And what is your book about? I would love to know. Or what kind of book is it? Is it like a art book? Is it like a fiction written novel? Yeah. Thanks to Jack for the kind words. And Jack is using Webflow. Oh, they're using the new Squarespace, but they're also teaching themselves Webflow. Yeah, Webflow is a great tool. I think if you know like front end engineering, I think it's like a really ideal platform for like a designer artist who knows also how to do the basics of front end code. So I got a few questions about this yesterday, but what I'm going to do now is I think I'm going to develop these clouds a little bit more. One cool thing about mood boarding is you can identify the common themes and patterns. So I noticed that I just have a lot of these like lush, fluffy clouds, and it's almost like dreamlike. So I wanted to put them in here. Oh, Chris owns a comic book studio, and this was the latest book in their series of character designs. Well, congrats, that's huge. You should link to it also. I'm sure people would probably be really interested. Ken has a dog named Phoenix. It's a really cute Shiba Inu. And Phoenix now knows how to put his chin in Ken's hand on command. That's amazing. So I see that Chris linked to his comics in the chat, so you guys should check that out. Let's like celebrate each other's accomplishments. And Jack wants to know why I'm using Photoshop versus Illustrator, or like how I would use Photoshop versus Illustrator differently. So that's a great question. Because Illustrator is vector, I feel like it's kind of hard for me to paint in this way. I know that there are really talented vector artists who are basically painting with shape and line, like Robzilla or Tracy Ching, both of whom have been on this stream before actually. But for me, I just know that my strengths are in painting with a stylus, as though I'm like painting on a canvas almost. So I want to be able to like create this, have this like texture on this brush. And I find it can be a little tricky with Illustrator because it's more vector based. So that's why I am painting in Photoshop. But I will use Illustrator for if I'm creating like a logo or I mentioned this yesterday, I do my invoices in Illustrator, and like I oddly really still enjoy doing all of my invoices by hand. I know a lot of people have like automated invoice systems, but I don't know, there's something like nice, and it feels like handmade when I do it on my own. So yeah. One cool thing about Illustrator is, you can scale it up and down because it's vector, and you can't really do that with Photoshop. If you make a painting at a certain size and then you size it larger, it will be like pixelated. So I usually just always paint at a really high resolution. Like sometimes I'll just paint at 450 DPI because I know that the max that I'll need is 300 for if I print. And then so if I do 450, then I'm good for 1.5x. Yeah, so I hope that answered your question. And welcome to Maggie. Maggie also has a dog named Rory, and Rory can now stick her nose in Maggie's hand when she makes an O shape with it. That's really funny. That's like, I'm gonna draw your dogs really quick. So like, if that's your dog, and then you're like, come here, dog. And the dog's like, okay, this is weird. I don't know why I'm sticking my hand in your palm, but fine. Maybe there's a treat on the other side of it. Cool, so, let's see. So, like I mentioned, I added this character in kind of late. So I basically just had fun drawing the background, and then I was like, it'd be kind of interesting if I drew a character in the foreground. So as a result, I think that the colors are a little competing with each other. And so what I'll do now is, because I organized my files to, initially I organized it neatly and now it's not very neat, but I can now go in on a more granular scale and start to adjust the colors. So for example, I have this whole background this whole like bottom section as its own layer group. So, and it's like, it feels a little bit too blue. So, oh yeah, that's because I made it so blue up there. So I'm going to now adjust it a little, and hopefully that ties in a little bit better, so you can kind of see the difference. Or I'll go here. So that's what it was before, and then this is what it is after. I think it's a little better. Oh, Ronnie says that the dog looked like KK Slider from Animal Crossing. Yeah, love that game. Have not been able to accomplish the KK Slider guy visiting my island. If anyone has and has tips in the chat, please let me know. I've kind of like given up. Cool, and so one thing I'll do now is I have this hue saturation layer, and from time to time I'll just throw it up there and see how my values are. So as you can see, because I added in the character kind of last minute, the values are not really working. The character blends in a lot with the background, and ideally the character being the main focal point would stand out a bit more. So I'm going to group her dress, and you can see here that I have like different parts of the character's outfit grouped together. And then I'm gonna throw a brightness adjustment layer on and clip it to just the group. And then I will play around with maybe having the dress be darker. And so I have no idea what the colors actually will end up looking like. Well, I have some faint idea, but I don't really know. But you can see that from this black and white view, the tones are like significantly better. This will probably require some adjusting later on, but I think it's a good start in figuring out how to differentiate the character from the background, which was an issue. Yeah, thanks, Catherine, for saying that this trick is helpful. I actually learned this trick on a Adobe live stream from Meg Hunt, who is also really talented. And yeah, like Jack said, I think that this also is really helpful because, you know, you might consider that people will have different, like varying levels of eyesight. So some people might not be able to discern between two really light colors that are low contrast. Cool. So, you know, in this case, the colors aren't also perfect, but I think it's more realistic, right? Like, I initially painted this background to be this like very bright, vivid, lush scene just because I was having fun. And then when I pop this girl in, like if she's closer to us and the light source is behind her, the light source could be perhaps like the sun somewhere back here, but this is the moon for now. Then the character would then be darker and possibly also less saturated because they're further away from this like vivid sunset. So the shadow would be darker. We're seeing like their shadow side. So I hope that's helpful in helping create future compositions or adding in new characters to your existing pieces. Cool, so this guy is now gray, and I don't really want him to be gray. I want this canvas to be slightly blue. And then, even though that's not 100% fitting right now, I can just pop open this hue saturation slider and then just slide that hue around and see if there's a potentially better fit. Cool, so also because I've grouped my layers together, I can now kind of manipulate these two. So I can see what it'll look like if this character is smaller or larger. And I actually like her the size that she's at. But I think I'll space out the artboard a tad because it's feeling a little cramped. And then another thing I'll start to look out for in terms of the composition is for tangent lines. So for example, if we just like outline all of the edges of the elements in the scene, you would get like this horizon line here, and then you would get this canvas. So I don't want the elements to be like too close to each other in terms of their natural tangent points, if that makes sense. So like right now, the canvas is really close to the place where the canvas cuts off is really close to like the horizon line. And then I also think this like plane of the canvas doesn't like super match the plane of the girl. And then I have to like also think about the plane of the bottom. So as I draw these lines, it helps me to see where there are some issues with perspective. Because I think that sometimes we can look at a piece that's work in progress and think like, I can't really tell what's wrong with it, but there's something kind of weird. And I think just like going back to these really basic principles, these tools at our disposal, we can identify, you know, the tones are too close in value, or there's like too many tangent points. So I hope that helps. And if you have any questions about what I'm going through, feel free to ask it in the chat. Cool, so I'm just dropping that edge on the canvas. Oops. And then I'm going to this part too. If you are tuning in and in the live audience, I would love to know what you are working on today. It could be what you're working on personally or what you're working on. Maybe you're drawing something professionally, but let's do a little sharing of like what everyone is up to. Hi to Shara for joining the chat. Oh, cool. Maggie spent her lunch break learning a new song on the guitar. That's great. The right corner of the canvas should be a bit higher than the left to get a better perspective. The right corner of the canvas. Oh, you mean this part? Oh yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah, I actually had this whole plan for the top that maybe I'll tackle next. But I'm gonna look for the orange sketch that I had done. I actually had this plan to flesh out the clouds so that you can kind of get more of a dreamy feeling. But I figured that I'll focus on making sure that the girl matches the background a bit more before I flesh out the I think the back parts. So, oh, hi, Shauna. Thanks for joining in. On the little canvas. Oh, thanks. Yes, you're right. That's a great catch. Yes. Yeah, this guy is a little rough. I've been playing around with like, where should this even be, you know? Because it's kind of at a odd angle. You can do a value check. Yeah, totally. There's a bunch of different ways that you can do a value check actually too. The other day I learned a really quick one where you can change your your Command Y shortcut to be a grayscale version. Christina asks, how do you deal with creative blocks? That's a great question. I think I'm gonna also toss that back to the chat. Like, just curious with everyone watching, how do you deal with creative blocks? I think like in the last 2 months, I've totally dealt with creative blocks because just with everything changing, it can be kind of hard to like paint, you know? Like I had a few client projects that were postponed, for example, like a mural, but I still had to paint them just like on my computer. And there was a part of me that was like, I just can't like make a mural right now. Like I'm just not like feeling murally. And I think that that's okay, first of all, to feel that way. Obviously, if you're doing it for a client, important to communicate that you might be going through creative block. But I think that like psychologically, for me, it's kind of like my relationship with creative work feels like you're holding a stone that is like maybe from the river, so it's wet, and you can't hold it too tight because it will slip out of your hand if you do. Like if you're like, oh my God, like I have a creative block and I just have to like make stuff, and you force yourself through it, like that's probably, it might work for some people, but for me, I know that that is not helpful or healthy. But then if you're too lax about it and you just like hold your palm out, then the stone will fall off. So you just need to have the right balance and the right grasp on that slippery rock. And so for me, then it's about recognizing when I'm grasping too hard and I just need to like relax and just give myself space to chill, or when I am slacking off and I should actually try to be more disciplined. And I think that it's kind of like this muscle that you have to develop in your own relationship with yourself. Nancy says that she tries to be creative in another aspect, like cooking, to get the creative juices to start flowing again, and sometimes it works. Yeah, I've taken great joy in organizing my living space better, you know, because now we're at home more, and I also feel like I've just ended up with a really better designed like living room and like living setup, and then that's like inspired me to just get back into painting more. Yeah, Elizabeth says subconscious drawing. Put your pencil on the paper, draw a line, another, and then eventually have a drawing. Do some warm-ups if you don't want to do something 100% original. And that's actually a really awesome approach, I think. I really love doing that for these color studies, is I will just start drawing shapes and I'm not really thinking too hard about like, oh, what is the outcome gonna be? Or like, can I share this? Or will anyone like it? It's just like, what shapes feel good to me today? And what do I wanna draw? And then you'll usually end up with something actually really interesting because it's natural and subconscious. Yeah, basically Chris summed up my approach, which is like, if you're working on a project and you have a block, unless you have an urgent deadline and people are counting on you, in which case you should probably work on your project and keep your commitments or communicate, you know, the issues that you're working through. But if you can, it can be really helpful to step away and take the day off. And I think that forcing it can make it worse. For me, it's just the balance between knowing when I'm like forcing it too hard and I should take a break versus I'm actually slacking off and I'm like avoiding this for some reason and I should just do it. And knowing that balance, I think, is a really personal balance. Cool, so I'm gonna go back to this layer group. I think that maybe it's too low. And I might also play with the crop a little bit. So I originally drew this background, but I kind of like, maybe like a cropped version might be kind of nice. Because I like the way that the character is turning out. Oops. So I'm just mocking up really quick, you know, what the composition might look like, and maybe I can bring this guy down. But for now, we'll just stick with this bigger version. Oops. Top right palette study, very common. Yeah, I love this color study. It's really fun to do. I'd love to know, Elizabeth, you have sparked a really interesting conversation, and I'd love to know either from Elizabeth or from others in the chat if there are other types of like fun warm-up, getting into the flow, drawing exercises that you guys like to do. I've shared two of mine, this color studies exercise, and then last week we did a quick sketch exercise too. Yeah, would love to hear if anyone else has any fun warm-up. Or like, how do you just start getting into the zone and like getting those creative juices flowing and brainstorming? Cool. So one thing I actually was really excited to do is draw these stars in the sky. I really enjoy drawing these kinds of like celestial kind of patterns, and I was also going to try this new effect that I learned for Photoshop. So we're just gonna test it out. So I learned actually yesterday this cool blur feature. It's a radial blur. Okay, that's kind of a lot. So I'm gonna just test it out. Cool. So if you didn't see that, basically, I drew these guys, and then then I'm going to do a radial blur. But I want it to be a little bit less pronounced. But I like that because it kind of creates this like sense of perspective. Chris says, top tips, never start work for the day without a mug of tea. I agree. We actually have a daily routine of brewing a different batch of tea every day. So I've been doing like peppermint, black tea, green tea. Sam always has a laundry list of ideas and projects and so that sparks a starting point. Elizabeth, for a class, they have listened to a song and then write down all the words that come to mind until the song ends. That's awesome. And then take inspiration from there. And that's why I love Lullatone, which is this band that we're listening to in the background. They're one of my favorite artists to listen to while I paint because they're just so chill and relaxing. And I think a lot of my work, I try to make it delightful in some way, even if it's like a sad themed painting. I still want my work to feel friendly. So yeah. To answer your question, Mike, I do not make my own custom brushes in Photoshop. I have made custom brushes, but I primarily use Kyle's brushes because they're just awesome. So I'm using his, what is this? His summer brush is 2018 pack, and I'm using the China brush. Cool, so now that I've drawn the stars in the sky, I was actually really excited to draw the stars down here in the reflection. Oh, thanks to Jeffrey for posting the link to Kyle's brushes. Yeah, thanks for sharing that exercise, Elizabeth. And I think speaking of music, what is everybody listening to? What does everyone like to listen to when you do art? Sometimes I listen to podcasts. I listen to Lullatone a lot. Lately I've been listening to a lot of like 90s artists. So I've been listening to a lot of Britney Spears and Ashley Simpson. Shout out to anyone who also was a teenage girl in the 2000s. Thanks to Tara for saying this is your new favorite stream. Safna says, Safan, sorry, says sometimes K-pop. What K-pop bands do you like? I like Blackpink and Big Bang. And I used to be a fan of 2NE1, but then they disbanded. Oh, thanks for the kind words, guys. Oh, Jeffrey says he likes listening to explosions in the sky. I love listening to explosions in the sky. I love listening to either like really chill stuff or extremely poppy stuff, like K-pop or like Justin Bieber or something. Cool. So, we're almost at the end of our day 2 stream. So before, we still have a few more minutes to go, but before we wrap up, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who tuned in and who joined this experimental new streaming concept, Doodle Therapy. For me, I actually never shared where Doodle Therapy started from, but basically it's this idea that my friend and fellow artist Ryan Putnam and I had like 4 years ago, where we used to be studio mates. So we used to share an art studio as an office, and we would get asked to do a lot of like interviews and podcasts, and for us we'd be like, that's cool, but we're both like artists, so we just prefer to like sit around, just draw, and like, as opposed to like behind a mic and a camera and do an interview. And so we were like, we should just like get our art friends together and just draw, and we can just talk about life and how it's going for all of us. So that's just the concept of this show that I pitched to Adobe. And so I really want to say thanks to everyone who tuned in and just tuned in for a few streams of this chill experimental format where, we hopefully could talk a little bit about how we're doing, especially during this time, but just get into the flow of doodling. I had a lot of fun, and it was also really fun to just like interact with everyone. Actually, to be honest, I was a little nervous to start, but then everyone was so friendly and supportive in the chat, and it was just really cool to like interact with this community in this way. So I just want to say thanks for tuning in. If you are not watching this live, you can catch all of the replays on the Adobe Creative Cloud channel. Just search Doodle Therapy, Alice Lee. Oh yes, thanks Mike for noticing in the final minutes of this stream, that is indeed Pikachu on my monitor. And then this is not Bulbasaur, but I call it my Bulbasaur. So yeah, thanks. And I hope that this, brought a little bit of joy and delight and like a peaceful moment to your day. If you're watching this after the stream, feel free to reach out and ask any questions. You can ping me at by Alice Lee. That is my handle anywhere on Instagram, Twitter, Behance. If you message me, I'll check it. And you can also post in the design-other channel if you do end up participating in the doodle prompt. And thanks to all the people who submitted both last week and this week. I will be contacting the sticker giveaway winners for their mailing address. Yeah, thanks to everyone for tuning in. And definitely say hi. And I hope that like we can kind of bring this moment of peace and this chill doodling vibe into our everyday lives. I think that's one cool thing about doodling, is that it's a very inherently de-stressing activity. And shout out to Sam for being an awesome moderator as well. Let's give him props. Yeah, so thanks to everyone for tuning in. I hope you have an awesome rest of the week. Stay tuned for a full lineup of really fun streams coming up tomorrow as well. Yeah, have a great day, everyone.